What have you done recently that qualifies you to be mayor of our city?
Well, what I've done recently is I've worked as a lawyer in finance. And as mayor of New York City, you have to be well-versed in budgeting. You have to be well-versed in finance, especially when you're dealing with our city's pension plans. And the last 20 years, I've been in the private sector. I think being in the private sector is a good thing. My opponent has spent all of his career in politics, and I think that having that experience makes you more qualified to do this job.
Thank you, sir.
Welcome to another edition of The Morning Stretch. Hey, happy Sunday. I'm your host, Tony Herbert. Today, I'm joined in the studio by a man who's navigated New York City's politics for over 30 years, including a run last year for mayor against Bill de Blasio. Now, I've been looking forward to hearing the stories and wisdom he has to share, so please help me welcome the very honorable Mr. Sal Albanese.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
You know what, first and foremost, tell us a little bit about what you're doing now. What you're
I'm an attorney in New York City, representing a couple of labor unions. So I do contract negotiations, handle disciplinary matters for a couple of locals. But I'm enjoying it. It's an interesting practice because I've always had a tremendous respect for our labor community, the working men and women who run the city for all of us, and I enjoy working with them.
But prior to this, you were a teacher as well.
I was a teacher for 11 years before I was elected to the city council, from 1972 to 1982. I was a school teacher in the New York City public schools. I coached varsity gymnastics for 5 years at high school, at a high school level. I taught in junior high school. Always worked with tough kids, with gang kids in Sunset Park. I did some work as a special assistant for drug prevention. When drugs became a huge problem in the city back in the late 70s and 80s, they assigned drug prevention specialists to each school. So I had a master's in health, and they asked me to do that, and I really enjoyed it, which meant working with tough kids, particularly in the Sunset Park area of Brooklyn. There were a lot of Latino gangs in those days, street gangs.
Now, when you were the council member, was that was your catchment area?
Bay Ridge, Sunset Park, and part of Dyker Heights was my area. I was elected in '82, representing that area. Actually, Sunset Park helped to elect me because the area was very Republican. I ran. I was the first Democrat to be elected. I had about 15 blocks of Sunset Park, mainly Latino constituents who actually really supported me heavily. I garnered about 85% of the vote, which basically helped. It was the winning margin in that race.
Now, is there a dream of yours to go back into teaching at some point?
Well, I love teaching. Yeah, I mean, I taught at the college level as well. I taught at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. I taught at St. Joseph's College. Yeah, I love teaching. I would love to go back, not full time, but maybe teach a course or two. It's a lot of fun.
Now, in this era of folks coming to our country, you came here when you were 8 years old. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm an immigrant. I was the only immigrant running for mayor last time, and it was, we're a city of immigrants, and I'm a perfect example. And when I got here, I couldn't speak English. It was the public schools. It was CUNY that allowed me to elevate myself into the middle class. When I went to the City University of New York, Tony, it was free, no tuition. My mother was.
Now we need that back right now.
My mother was a garment worker. My dad was disabled. If it wasn't for CUNY, me and my sisters would never be able to elevate ourselves into the middle class. So I'm the true New York City story. That's why this whole anti-immigrant sentiment is really troubling.
Was it hard to transition with regards to language? Was there a language barrier? Was there issues?
Yeah, it wasn't easy.
Were you self-taught?
Well, it was by osmosis. I kind of picked it up. I went to my first. I remember going into the classroom, and the teacher asked me what my address was, and I couldn't recite it in English. They had to get somebody who spoke Italian to help. It was very, very traumatic. So I do believe in transition. I do believe in bilingual education, so people could transition into English, because it was very traumatic.
Now, speaking of schools, what was your experience like as a teacher in this city at the time?
Well, it was always a bureaucratic, overly bureaucratic system, you know, where we had overcrowded classes, which is, by the way, still in existence today. We didn't have adequate recreational facilities that we have today, that we just still don't have today. And I always felt that the poor kids in the city, the people from working class neighborhoods, got the short end of the stick. We didn't do enough. We didn't do enough to help them to reduce class size. And also, in those days, there was more violence in the schools than there is today, believe it or not. Yeah, I mean, as I said, I went to a pretty tough high school, John Jay High School.
Oh, you went to John Jay, right?
Yeah, John Jay, and it was a lot of gang activity.
That's
a lot
what,
of
and Park Slope.
Yeah, yeah, it's no longer John Jay, by the way. It's now an academy. They broke it up.
Yeah, they broke it up into 4 different schools.
Exactly, so you're familiar with it. But I went back there to teach as well. So it was always, those neighborhoods were tough neighborhoods in those days. Of course, now it's millionaires and billionaires that live there. But in those days, it was pretty tough. You know, kids had to navigate that. And it was, for some, it was very difficult. Very stressful, actually. But it teaches you persistence, it teaches you survival skills.
Now, was that the premise of why you left the school? I mean, because of the violence? Or?
No. Well, the school, no, I loved working with tough kids. I mean, I did that my entire career. I left because I got elected to the city council. I moved into a new neighborhood, I was elected to the school board, and I started seeing that the politicians weren't doing anything. I just felt they were useless. So I decided to run for the city council, and I had tremendous grassroots support from my school board involvement, and I was elected in '82.
But now, you also ran for state assembly, correct?
I ran
state assembly in the 50th district in 1978.
That's correct.
And whatnot. Now,
I won the primary. I beat the Democratic machine in that race, but the area was heavily Republican, and I lost to Florence Sullivan, who was a Republican assemblywoman, and the following year, I ran for Democratic district leader. I beat the machine district leader in that neighborhood, who actually campaigned against me when I was running against a Republican. So I probably would not have gone further into the political arena had this guy not campaigned against me as a Democrat. So I went out, I beat him, and then I ran for the city council a couple of years later, and I beat the only Republican in the city council.
now that was 4 years later after that particular incident. And you know, I'm looking at your whole dossier here.
You got.
And you served 15 years in the city council,
Exactly.
correct? Okay.
15. I was reelected a number of times, and people predicted I would not because it was such a heavily Republican district. I had, I voted for the gay rights bill in 1986, where the vast majority of my constituents opposed it, and I had to shut my telephones down because it was so bad. The pressure was so intense. In those days, now it's taken for granted. Gay rights, LGBTs have become very popular
and very powerful.
Exactly. In those days, it wasn't the case. I'm a Catholic, so I had the entire Catholic hierarchy called because I was one of the swing votes in that district, and there was a real damaging political piece of reporting by the Daily News the weekend before the vote, where they had a picture of me and the Cardinal O'Connor in those days. Gay rights, Albanese, yes, O'Connor, no.
Oh, wow.
And in a heavily Catholic district, I took a pounding. They predicted I wouldn't get reelected, but we did. We won.
Wow.
85.
But how do you remain optimistic, having had those kind of setbacks?
Well, I'm optimistic. I have to remain optimistic because the political system impacts an awful lot of people, and one of the problems that I see is a lot of good people, like yourself and others, fight against the system, and even when you lose, you make changes. So I've seen things happen. What I didn't get credit for, but I knew I was because of my efforts. Things happen, and it's the only system that we have. We're still a democracy. We got to stay involved. It's frustrating, I have to say, and discouraging, because as you know, the power of money is one of the big problems that we have with our political process.
Right.
And, I ran for mayor, as you know, and I didn't accept money from real estate developers or lobbyists, and it was very difficult to compete. So it is tough sometimes to stay upbeat about it, but we can't give up. We got to keep moving forward.
Well, not giving up would mean that you'd have to have some kind of courage. Why do you believe that would be the standard bearer for anybody to be successful and being able to get elected?
Well, you've got to have some courage to get into the arena.
That trust me, I learned
The
that.
odds are so stacked against insurgents and
Mhm.
people that want to make change, that if you don't have that, if you don't have the persistence and the guts to get into it, you just not going to
Now,
succeed.
in the age of social media, we have all these gadgets and whatever the case may be. Can a person today deal with as many ups and downs as you've had and still be able to be successful knowing that technology can work against them?
It's still very hard unless we change the way these campaigns are funded. It's going to be very difficult. I mean, the reason why I'm optimistic is good because in '82 nobody gave me a chance of winning. So this guy was in office for 20 years, and I was able to mount a great effort to beat the Republican minority leader. But once you get to the bigger stage, as you know, you try to run citywide, then the money becomes more and more significant.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the money to get your name out there, you can't compete. That's what happened to me in the mayor's race. I mean, I came in second. I got 16% of the vote in the Democratic primary because I was able to participate in 2 debates. But I didn't have the money that Mayor de Blasio had, the $10 million,
yeah.
plus all the city resources to get my name out there. I mean, if you travel around the city now, even though I was in 2 debates, most people still don't know my name. So you've got to have the resources to project out. And that means television. Even with social media, unless you're on TV, you're not really in the race, especially running on a citywide basis.
Now, you ran on the Reform Party line.
I did.
And traditionally, it's kind of like a catch-22 to run outside of the Democratic Party. Why the Reform Party, and were there not resources there available to you?
No. The Reform Party is a new party.
Right.
Their aim is to reform the political system, campaign finance reform is one of their big issues, nonpartisan elections. To really overhaul it. That's why I was given the endorsement, because I've been a reformer all my life. I got 2% of the vote, which, in the general election where, there was as you know, a battle between a Republican and a Democrat, their party candidates get zilch. So I was able to get about 70,000 votes on that line. But the reason why I ran is because I think we need to reform our politics. I think it's the most important issue facing the city and the country.
So again, we talked about recognition, being able to have the ability to get the support. Do you think that also contributed to the thought process of folks making donations for your fundraising efforts? And how much of a challenge was that?
That was a terrible. It's very difficult to overcome. It's catch-22, right? You can't raise money because the media are saying you can't win, right? Because you're underfunded.
So they hurt you. Yeah.
Of course.
They hurt you.
You become actually severely damaged by the media stories. Instead of focusing on the issues, I mean, we got on the ballot.
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying that people who are peripheral candidates and have no support should get attention paid to them by the media. But I was a city council member. I have a tremendous record of independence and integrity. I got enough signatures to get on the ballot.
Right.
And we did raise a little bit of money. We had some union endorsements, and what happens is the media is geared towards supporting incumbents, and they write you off. And once they write you off, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
Well, Tony Herbert has no money, so
And they don't cover you. You don't get to cover it as the opposition. Right.
It's
You don't
called
get
the
coverage.
wealth primary. If you lose if you're not, the first primary is a wealth primary. How much money can you raise?
Right. That's always the first question anybody asks.
And it's a terrible system, because what they should be asking is, hey, it should be saying, Tony Herbert has enough support to get on the ballot. He's got a lot to say about public policy. We need to cover this guy. No, but you don't. Tony Herbert can't raise money from big real estate. Tony Herbert can't raise money from lobbyists. So he has no money, and he's not personally wealthy. So we're not going to cover him, which is a tragedy.
So how vital is the support of the real estate industry in New York?
Well, I think they're the most powerful force in the city. They actually have tremendous clout. I think they own many of our politicians, including our mayor, because they're able to generate tremendous financial support.
Does that make them a necessary evil?
I
To run for mayor, that
yeah,
at least in that case.
I think. Well, I didn't think so. I didn't think that I wanted to be. I don't want to be dependent on big real estate. Because if you get there, I always said the job is not worth having unless you can do the people's business, right? And if big real estate owns you, you can't do that, because housing is one of the most important issues facing the city. And affordable housing, as you know, is fast disappearing, and big real estate has a lot to say about that. I mean, they have the right, like any other industry, to participate, but they have tremendous influence, out of proportion with any other entity. Not only that, they have tremendous access to the media. They've got lobbyists who basically are whispering into the ear of the people who own the newspapers. Mort Zuckerman, who owned the Daily News, was a real estate developer. I couldn't get to first base with the Daily News. I mean, I could have cured cancer. They would have never endorsed me.
So is it safe to say that, or I'll ask this question, can somebody get elected without them?
Under the present system in New York City, very, very hard. It would be a miracle. It would be a miracle.
We'll come back with some more with Sal. I want to thank you guys. And I have some more questions for you, so stay with us. We'll be right back after this.
Mr. de Blasio, here's a true story. A political leader and his associates used pay-for-play tactics, widely regarded that way, in campaign fundraising, but were not charged with a crime. However, state and federal prosecutors insist those people did violate the intent and the spirit of the law. While there were no criminal charges, would you want people like that working for you?
To the question at hand, and I certainly understand the underlying meaning, I'm very proud of what we've achieved in this administration. I'm proud of the ethical standards that we've set and kept to throughout. And here's what we focused on all along the way. We focused on things like creating pre-K for all our kids and affordable housing for New Yorkers who needed it. Those were efforts worth fighting for. And I look at everything that we've done, and I'm very convinced that high standards were kept to, and the results speak for themselves in terms of the hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers whose lives we've improved. That's what I came here to do, make people's lives better. And I will continue that if the people give me another term.
But prosecutors say you violated the intent and spirit of the law. Would you want people like that working for you?
Look, I'm very satisfied the way I handled things. Everything was looked at very, very carefully. Tremendous amount of scrutiny that led to the clarification that we had done things the right way. And I'm content that we did things the right way and continue to do things the right way. I'm very satisfied with everyone who works for me and the high standards they hold. And if you look at what they've produced for the people in New York City, we talk about finance, on-time budgets, balanced budgets, historic reserves that have been achieved by this administration while serving people with new initiatives like pre-K and affordable housing. I'm very, very proud of this team and the quality of the work they've done.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, you have 30 seconds for
I think the people of the city of New York want integrity in government. They do care about that, despite what Bill says. And we need a higher standard for a mayor than not being indicted. And also, you know, $15 million in legal fees that he's sticking the taxpayers with when he and his aides were engaged in political activity. Basically, the prosecutors said that they violated the spirit and the intent of the law, and they acted unethically and inappropriately. They couldn't indict them because the laws are kind of murky. I think we need a government that people believe in, that you don't need to be a big donor to get access to government, and unfortunately that's the case. And I've got a number of proposals to address that.
Okay, we're back right here at the Morning Stretch, still sitting here with the Honorable Sal Albanese. Sal, you've seen a lot of mayors come and go. What's your assessment of this mayor right now? I mean, I know you ran against him, but I mean, your professional assessment.
He's certainly one of the least effective mayors that I've observed over my years in government. Because he's blessed that he has an awful lot of money. The city's doing well financially, so he's able to do a couple good things, like the pre-kindergarten program is a good thing.
Do we have a surplus?
We do have a surplus. We do have a surplus. So he's blessed with that. But beyond that, he's failed to address major issues. He's not taken advantage of the resources that we have. For example, homelessness is at a record high.
Right.
His affordable housing plan is a total failure because housing is not affordable. Public housing has been neglected.
Extremely. Yeah.
Boilers, very basic. He failed to replace them with. These are boilers from the 50s, as you know.
Right.
He runs the New York City Housing Authority, and it's been a disaster where during the winter those people had to go without heat for so many different days.
A lot of mismanagement in that area. We've actually been arguing a lot about that and talked about it on this program.
I think you're right on top. Mass transit.
Oh.
Even though he doesn't control it, because he only has 4 board members on the MTA board, he's the mayor of New York City. His constituents ride those subways.
Right.
They take those buses. He should be yelling and screaming and using it as a using the bully pulpit to
Right.
get to finally get the governor and the state legislature to act, and also to fund it properly. I don't know if you remember this. I actually embarrassed him to take the train. I had a press conference in front of the gym.
Right, because you stayed on the trains.
Exactly.
Our train
Exactly.
at that.
He worked. The guy didn't take the subway for like months until I embarrassed him. I was on the out in front of the gym, offered to take him with me back to City Hall on the R line, and he ducked me. And then, but the same day in the evening, he took the C train. So I forced him to take the subway. So he's mismanaged that. He hasn't really been a tremendous proponent
Right.
of mass transit and didn't put enough pressure on the governor and the legislature. And also, he's not a hard worker. I mean, how do you, I mean, I remember Mayor Dinkins, Mayor Giuliani, Mayor Koch, they were at City Hall at 7 o'clock
They
in
worked.
the morning.
They worked.
They worked. This guy doesn't show up until like
He's in
midday.
Boston. He's in Boston.
He's out of town.
Let me ask this question. Do you think that in some way, shape, or
And
form,
by the way, pay to play is out of control.
oh, I mean, hugely.
Pay-to-play
I mean,
corruption,
talk about that real quick. I mean, because
pay-to-play
that was
corruption.
something you guys talked
Well,
about. And
well, the mayor almost got indicted. I mean, the
Right.
the U.S. attorney and the Manhattan DA said that he acted unethically and inappropriately. Basically, people, lobbyists and real estate developers donated huge sums of money to his campaign, and he did favors for them. I
Right.
mean, he gave them his personal cell number.
Right, exactly.
You don't do that as the mayor. You I mean, that's called pay to play. That means that the average person who doesn't have those kinds of resources can't get to the mayor. So only if you're, somebody who has deep pocket. And it's been on steroids under this guy.
but how should that have resonated with voters with regards to hearing that and seeing it in the media?
It should have resonated. I think that, unfortunately, once again, money played a big role. I mean, I was considered his strongest opponent, but I had $200,000. He had $10 million plus all of the city,
Or real estate?
big real estate,
Unions, some unions.
some unions who thought the unions are like everyone else. I mean, they don't want to buck an incumbent, right?
Right.
Because they've got to do business with him. Although he hasn't really been that great to labor, quite honestly, despite his image as a strong supporter.
I
of
think
labor.
that he's union busting. I'll be clear with you with regards to what he's doing with corrections and what he's trying to do out there on Rikers. I want to talk about that after this,
Sure.
down the line. But do you think that he's been compared to Trump in his terms of choice of managers, with regards to who he hires and how he is ineffective with regards to getting them to do their job?
Absolutely. Well, he doesn't pay attention to the job. That's part of
Right.
the problem. As I pointed out, other mayors gather their commissioners at least once a week. This guy doesn't do that. He doesn't monitor. He doesn't ride herd over his people. Because no matter how good people are, you've got to hold them accountable. He's hired some bad people,
Right.
as you know. Many of them have left already.
Right.
HRA was a disaster.
NYCHA,
go on and on and on.
ACS. I mean, I think
ACS.
she got a raw deal. I was a
Carry
big fan.
On,
I was a
you
big
know.
fan of Carry On.
Probably.
She got a raw
He
deal. She
stayed-
got caught up in the middle of the politics of both the governor and the mayor,
Yeah.
and she was what they call casualty of the war.
She was a collateral
Collateral
damage, as they
damage,
say.
and she was doing a darn good job. I
Yeah.
know people that work there.
Look, being mayor is a 24/7 job. I
Right.
mean, you can't leave the city and take off for weeks at a time. You got to hold people accountable. He hasn't done that. He's been blessed, as I said, with huge resources. That's one of the reasons why he got reelected, because he did buy a lot of people off around the city. Project here, project there, and people didn't look at the big picture: the homelessness, the MTA,
Right.
NYCHA, and the people in NYCHA. Quite frankly, some of the tenant leaders were great people, but they were kind of
They were feeling-
compromised by, I believe, some city council members who gave their tenant association a
Little
little
bit
bit
of
of money,
change,
a little
right,
bit of change.
right.
And they really didn't
Yeah.
do in my opinion, what they should have done was be more aggressive about holding this guy accountable. But it's human nature, you know.
Right,
And also,
right.
as I said, here I am underfunded dramatically and being written off by the press. So people are not going to take risks, Tony. They're just not going to take risks.
Well, what about this whole thing with him in the media and calling them fake news
Yeah.
because they're reporting on what he's doing?
He's Trump-like. I mean, that's what Trump
That's
does.
what we say Trumpian up here, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, that's what Trump does. I mean, part of being mayor is you've got to deal with the press, right? I mean, sometimes they're not fair, sometimes they are, but a lot of the reporters are pretty good. I mean, they do a good job. You can't, I mean, Koch, Dinkins, Giuliani, they had daily press conferences, Tony. There was exchanges in the Blue Room. They went back and forth.
Right.
This guy doesn't know press conferences, and when he does, he says it's off topic. You can't ask me that
You can't,
question.
yeah, yeah.
And he hates the reporters, and the reporters know that. So it was confirmed by those emails. You know,
Right.
4,700 emails where he basically beat up reporters, even reporters, by the way, that were pretty nice to him. And he got endorsed by the Times. You know, and he beat up the New York Times. I mean, they didn't cover him adequately, and they weren't, in my opinion, they were not aggressive enough. He should be thanking the New York Times. No, he went after the Times. He's very thin-skinned, very thin-skinned.
I mean, let's go back to the catastrophe with regards to Rikers Island and shutting it down and building these new jails in the community. What's your
Right?
thought?
I mean, obviously, a lot of change has to happen at Rikers Island. There were a lot of issues there, but the correction officers are being scapegoated. I mean, he hired a commissioner who was out of town most of the time, right? The guy was from Maine somewhere. I don't know how he picked this guy up. And obviously, I mean, one of the things I talked about in the campaign is closing down some of the facilities in Rikers, which were really in disrepair, right? And maybe moving the young people and the women off the island, but setting up these other facilities around the city, I don't see how it's feasible. Already in the Bronx, right? People don't want a prison facility there,
Right,
So
right.
I think it's a bad move. I think that corrections officers have the toughest job in the city, and he has not supported them. And he's caused, I mean, how many officers have been injured? So I'm not a big fan of his proposal. First of all, what de Blasio does is he punts, he kicks the can down the road, you know, in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And also he set some very interesting barometers, right? He says if we get down to under 5,000 inmates, you know, so is he really doing anything what happens if there's a crime wave, right? I mean, where do you put people?
Well,
you know?
if you look at Trump, you look at the comparison between him, his cabinet, him, and real estate, you get the impression that he is Trump as a progressive.
Exactly.
Am I right or wrong?
Exactly. He's the left version of Trump.
Oh my
The
God.
left version.
What I'm looking at some stuff that, you know, there was a lot of clips with regards to the debates that you guys had. And a lot of people thought that you fared well. You said that some even thought that you were too rough on him?
Yeah, some people thought I was too aggressive. As a matter of fact, the first debate on New York 1, some of my campaign people were saying that you were too aggressive and you got to bring out your proposal. I thought I did, but so the
We wanted you to come hard.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, all the news reports all said that I was very aggressive. That I went at him repeatedly. I mean, the Daily News the next day and the Post said that, you know, I started punching right outside the gate and I kept going throughout the debate. But he knew full well, Tony, that I couldn't raise the money to take those clips and project them out.
Right.
You know, TV costs. 1 week of television in New York City, you're spending $1 million. I had a total of $200,000 that I spent
The entire
the
campaign.
entire campaign. I mean, it really tells the story of how corrupt our campaign finance system
And that's what I want to talk to you about, because I fell victim to that too. I mean,
You
campaign
know
finance.
firsthand.
Oh, I mean, they're supposed to be structured for the purposes of helping those that can't raise that absorbent amount of money. However, what I find, everybody who had been insurgents, i.e., those individuals who are running, have been put in a position where they never see the money. and there's always something being found to hold them back. But then campaign finance will turn around and find them.
I know.
And so is it a system designed to help you to finance those that they're really rallying behind?
No, the system was put in place to try and help insurgents to compete. And allegedly, it does the exact opposite. You get caught up in this huge bureaucracy.
Right.
You need an entire compliance team, which costs you money, right? And invariably, you'll make some mistakes, as everybody does. You know, you forget the address is wrong for a particular contribution, some minor thing. I mean, obviously, if people are committing fraud, they should go to jail. But most of the stuff is minutia, and people get overwhelmed by it, and they wind up spending more time on trying to deal with the campaign finance board than focusing on the issues in the campaign. We got to abolish it. It's a terrible system.
I think so.
As I told you before we went on.
Yeah, let's talk about the piece.
Seattle has a great system, which will, I believe, revolutionize campaigns. They've got a voucher system where every registered voter in Seattle receives 4 $25 vouchers. If you're a wealthy industrialist or somebody who
You still get the four
$25 vouchers,
Nice.
and then you pledge that money to a candidate running for municipal office. You know, people, and it forces candidates to actually engage with regular people. Right now, I can tell you this, and I'm sure you can testify to this. If you're running citywide, you're spending your time. Most people do. I didn't. That's why I didn't raise any money. Going after big money, real estate developers, lobbyists, their families. They're the ones that contribute money. So people who live in public housing, who are taxpayers, who are paying rent, by the way, most of them, they're not even in the equation. Under this system, they would get the same voucher as somebody.
So it'd be
who's
a
very
level
low.
playing field.
Absolutely.
No campaign finance
Right.
corruption.
Oh yeah, no
hopefully not.
lobbyists
Yeah.
can't contribute. You know, in New York City, lobbyists can contribute. They bundle money.
They
which
bundle,
is incredible.
yeah, right.
There's a huge conflict of interest under this law. It's a terrible system. Seattle has done it very, very effectively, and I'm on the Charter Revision Commission. Borough President Adams
Right, they
just
appointed you,
appointed
right.
me.
Okay.
And one of the areas that I'm going to be focusing on is overhauling our campaign finance
We
system.
should. And I appreciate you doing that.
It's important because people, if you had a voucher system in place when you ran for public advocate, when you were thinking about running, you would have definitely competed.
Yeah.
You would have, because everybody, where you live would get a voucher. Everybody,
Right.
Working class, if you look at who contributes to these campaigns, poor people, working class people,
Right.
don't contribute. It's the influence peddlers. And you go to your neighbors and, they'd say, Tony's a great guy. Yeah, I pledge my voucher. And you would raise
like a
enough
great
money
idea.
to compete. I mean, you have to demonstrate you've got some support. You have to
Right.
get on the ballot.
Right.
You have to raise a little bit of money, a foundation,
Right.
which is nominal. And then you get the ability to, you go to a block party, hey, you go to a street fair, and you say, hey,
You're hustling for their voucher.
yeah, and you're talking, and
Yeah.
it forces regular people to engage with people running for office. Right now, it's just lip service.
Well, how do you keep the advent of not public, but party influence out of that aspect? How do you keep them out of the mix of the influence of trying to push people in one way?
Well, that's always going to be there. Parties do that, but I think that parties are not as influential as they were in the past.
Right.
I think the key is being able to. But by the way, most people are independents now. The independent voter is growing by leaps and bounds. So if you are able to get, the biggest problem is getting in front of the voters, and you need money to do that. You need mail, and you need TV, and even Facebook ads are expensive, and all of that stuff. And the reason why these people stay in office forever is because there really is no competition. The party controls the process. The machines control the process, and there's listen. It's not an accident, Tony, that these systems are in place. I mean, the people that are in office, the professional politicians, and the lobbyists. We have a shadow government in New York City. We have. And by the way, De Blasio is agents of the
Agents
city.
of the city,
All
right.
these guys are lobbyists. They're acting as advisors to the mayor. At the same time, they're representing clients before the city. It's a huge conflict of interest, and they're running the government. But and one of the ways they continue to maintain that power is because insurgents can't, especially insurgents who are middle class, who are not Mike Bloomberg, Even if you're a little rich, you can't compete with these guys because they're able to get the special interest money into their coffers, and you can't compete.
Does that merit some type of a special prosecutor? And that kind of, things like that happen?
Well, that's why de Blasio almost got indicted, because the U.S. attorney. I mean, how many politicians have been indicted and convicted?
Oh my gosh.
I mean, it's we have an epidemic of crime.
Sadly, a lot of them are attorneys too.
Well, attorneys. The bottom line is that I call the political class in New York the sixth organized crime family. There were five organized crime families. They're number six, because they basically, as you pointed out, the machines, the lobbyists. It's all business. It's not about the people's business. It's about their business. And that to me is why I always say that the system is corrupt. But there's hope. Other cities, other states, Maine, Vermont, they're doing innovative things to take the influence out and stop the people who are benefiting from making money in politics. Yeah, you go into government because you want to make a difference in people's lives, right?
Right.
These folks go into government to make money, and the
Exactly.
people around them, they're feeding each other.
And the people that it's supposed to matter to is suffering.
Exactly. That's why this voucher campaign finance reform system
I
is
like that.
important. Very
I like that.
important. You should talk more about it. I'll get you more information.
No,
if you
please,
need
by
it.
all means. I think that's something that needs to be promoted. I think if it levels the playing field, it will probably help us to produce more individuals interested in running for government.
Well, I was pleasantly surprised when Borough President Adams called me. I mean, I know Eric. We've never been close, but he said, you know what? He said, I really admire your idea. He says, we got to do something. We have to reform the system, and this is a way to do it. And he actually testified before the Governmental Operations Committee, the City Council, to bring this into the fold in New York City. But of course, the City Council, controlled by lobbyists and others, they're not excited
like,
about
no,
real
don't touch
reform.
that, or we won't
Exactly.
support you. And then
so I
they're
was
threatening.
impressed that he reached out, and as I said, I know you're going to stay active politically, and you represent a lot of folks that have a vested interest in the city. You should talk to them about this system, because at the end of the day, big money dominates the process. And in New York City, we have a shadow government of real estate developers, lobbyists, and politicians. That could be. We need to break them up.
And what's interesting is Richie Torres actually proposed a law that would basically put that would bar the mayor from actually stopping investigations or whatever the case may be. What's your thoughts on that?
No, I think it's a great idea. Well, one of the problems is, and Richie brought this up, is he set up the city council really never did significant oversight. And Torres and Corey Johnson, to their credit, are establishing this investigative unit,
Right,
which
right.
they'll do their own due diligence. Now, the jury's still out. We'll see what happens.
Well, de Blasio wanted to
see what happens.
fire Mark Peters.
Yes, the
You know what
DOI
have you.
commissioner, right?
Right.
And the city council is trying to pass legislation to prevent them from doing that. I also think we need advice and consent. By the way, any commissioner that the mayor appoints should go before the city council, whether it be the police commissioner or anyone else, to go through a due diligence process, advice and consent. The council has to approve them, because a lot of folks there's no real background checks on these folks, not in terms of corruption, but in terms of their politics and what have you. Like in the Senate, for example, and in the federal government, there's advice and consent. You go before the Senate if you're a cabinet appointee,
Right.
to get consent. We're not doing that in the city council.
Does this not mirror what's happening with Trump and Mueller? I mean, to some degree, this whole issue with de Blasio
and Mark
and
Peters.
Peters?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It becomes Trumpian.
I think de Blasio would love to fire him. I mean, he was de Blasio's treasurer, which is amazing to me.
So he knows where the bodies are.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
why isn't he doing his job? That's what we need
Peters?
him to do. Peters.
Yeah, he actually. The last couple of years, I've been pleasantly surprised. He's become much more proactive in his investigations of the de Blasio ministries. That's why I think de Blasio wants to get rid of him. I mean, he just did that investigation on the police department's sex abuse squad. And he said they were understaffed. They're not doing the proper investigations.
And
de
some of
Blasio-
the DA's offices? Is that falling in some of the DA offices you're talking
No,
about?
no, within the police department.
Okay,
They've got a sex crime unit.
Okay,
And,
okay.
and
Right.
remember, Peters said that it's inadequate. The caseload's too high.
But they also charged that to some of the DAs as well. That's why I was referencing. I think that there was something being said, even particularly with Gonzalez in Brooklyn, that there were some issues along that same vein. That's why I kind of was associated
Yeah, it could be.
with.
It could be.
Right.
There was. Yeah, I mean, it could be. I don't recall, but
Okay.
I think that may be the case.
Maybe
yeah.
I'm mixing it. I don't know. But
No. But he made some. He did make some observations about the district attorney's office. I don't remember specifically what, but he did. So he's become much more active. I criticized De Blasio very heavily when he appointed Peters because I said it's a conflict of interest. This guy's your treasurer, and lo and behold, the last couple of years, Peters has gone rogue on De Blasio.
let me ask this question: in this city council in the last few years,
Yeah.
compared to the city council you were on, what do you see different?
I see a lot of folks that are unfortunately professional politicians, permanent politicians. I don't think you have the same quality of folks that you had when I was there. We had a lot of talented people, that did other work. That were just not in politics to maintain a job forever. I think this city council has made is composed of a lot of people that want to stay in office forever, and I don't think that's healthy.
So
Some of them are unemployable.
Right. But where the whole thought process of term limits come in, if that's the case, why push term limits?
Well, because I think that term limits is a good thing, that it forces these folks to, they can't stay there forever. Because as you know, the odds are stacked against insurgents. So if you want to, some legislators want to stay in office for 30 years, and they're in Albany. Some members of the assembly have been in office 35 years, 40 years. And at least term limits, you get a little bit of a turnover,
Right.
turnover. I would like to see term limits throughout the state, actually, because what happens now is the city council members who are term limit run for the state senate, they run for the assembly, and to perpetuate themselves in office. So, I mean, I don't know what you think of term limits, but I think it's a good thing.
Term limits is a necessary evil,
Yeah.
quite frankly.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I always thought that term limits were basically at the hand of the voters making the decision and what have you, but it has to be educated voters.
And the problem is that the system is stacked in favor of incumbents,
Right.
and it's hard to mount a campaign. Money plays a role. These folks, as you know, have tremendous governmental resources. They buy off nonprofit groups in the area through these member items. Very hard to compete. So if the playing field was leveled and some of the stuff was banned, like for example, preventing nonprofits. If you run a nonprofit, right, in somebody's district,
Which I do.
you should not be allowed to contribute to campaigns. You're just not because you.
Well, we don't, so, yeah.
I'm just saying they put you in a funny position, right? You want to be able to deal with the government. You may want a government grant, and quality maybe doesn't matter. It's how much you contribute to a campaign. And you got a call from a politician, and you're in a funny position. The same thing with small business folks. They get a call from a politician. They do business with the city.
Right.
They feel like there's a sense of intimidation. So they contribute. They're not like the big real estate developers. They have got so much money. And they know that it's important for them to contribute to get what they want. But you get a small business person in a neighborhood, owns a drugstore or a grocery store, and may need city help, and you get a call from a councilman, you feel like you've got to contribute. That's why this voucher system will certainly eliminate that, and will make things. We need competition.
Right.
We need competition, and we need a level playing field, and we need to ban conflicts of interest. I also want to see. A end to the revolving door. If you're a city council member, you leave office, you can't lobby for 5 years.
Right.
You're a commissioner, you can't lobby for 5 years. Because what these guys do is they turn around and become lobbyists. I mean,
And use and peddle the influence.
exactly.
Let me flip on something else. Now, Mayor de Blasio famously pitched for a $16 an hour wage. And as I recall, looking at the history of some of the stuff that you passed, this was primarily designed for restaurant workers, and it failed. However, in 1996, you passed the New York City Living Wage Bill and succeeded.
Yep.
So what was it about your approach that was different from him, where you were successful and he failed?
Well, my approach dealt with contractors who did business with the city.
Okay.
They would have to pay their employees what those folks would get and paid in the private sector. We were talking about cafeteria workers. We were
Okay.
talking about security guards, and I also we had. By the way, Giuliani vetoed my bill, and we overrode his veto. We had a tremendous supporter from.
Peter Vallone?
Well, we had Peter Vallone was not crazy about it, but we had Reverend Youngblood
Okay.
from
okay. Johnny
Johnny Ray
Yeah.
Youngblood was
Yeah.
a tremendous advocate, and he put together a huge citizen
Reaction to-
lobbying effort, and it really worked. It was the first, by the way, the second living wage law in America. Baltimore passed the first one, we passed the second one, and my bill was on the front page of the Wall Street Journal when we passed it. It was pretty, in those days, it was controversial because we said a minimum wage is not enough. People can't survive on $7 an hour. People need a living wage. And we saw the contractors who had business with the city were basically, they were taking a lot of the cash and the workers were getting paid zero, very low wage. So we said, if you want to do business with the city, you have to pay folks, $15 an hour plus, and include medical benefits as well. So it was a revolutionary bill at that time, and I was proud of it because it impacted a lot of people.
Yes. Let's talk a little bit about some of the stuff that you talked on the campaign trail. Again, when you ran for mayor, the current homeless crisis. I think we
Right.
touched upon that a little bit, which is basically connected to a lot of these evictions that's going on out here. What's your thought along that lines as it relates to people being evicted almost every 15 seconds?
Well, but once again, big real estate and the big landlords in the city are buying their property left and right, and they're doing everything they can to drive, people who've been longtime residents, tenants, out of those buildings.
Right.
Some of them are rent regulated, and they're playing games with the rent regulation laws because they can. A one bedroom in Brooklyn now costs what? $2,500 a month to rent, $3,000, and these folks they're under rent regulation, right? And they're being driven out because the landlords can raise their rent dramatically, and also De Blasio's housing plan has made many neighborhoods unaffordable because they're building these luxury condominiums, right, where rents are skyrocketing, and of course it has a ripple effect on the landlords who own these old buildings. Say, hey, they're getting all this money to let I've got tenants who are on rent regulation, and they move to evict. They play all kinds of games. They say we have to repair the building. There's construction going on, and they drive people out, and the playing field, once again, is not equal. The New York Times just did a tremendous expose on the housing court in the city and how landlords are driving people out. And by the way, just for your information, 1995, we eliminated, the city council passed vacancy decontrol. I voted against it because what they did was they said if you're making X amount of dollars, or you're paying over $2,000 a month in rent, those apartments become decontrolled. And I predicted that would drive tens of thousands of units off the market, off the rent regulation rolls, and that's exactly what happened. And once again, the landlords bought the city council, it was one of the most, I think, one of the worst votes that the city council took in the 90s, because it really has contributed to homelessness. So people are evicted; they can't afford their rent. There are people living in shelters who have civil service jobs. I mean, it's unbelievable.
That's still today. Today.
I know.
Now-
I mean, you've visited some of the shelters.
my! I worked in one. I worked in a 40-bed women's shelter in East New York.
Oh, so you know.
So I know. The other question I had for you: does Airbnb, does it help or hurt us?
I think if it's used improper as it is. I think there's a lot of absentee landlords that are they're buying up properties and just basically renting them out like hotels. I don't think it's
So
a
that
good
takes
thing.
away the opportunity for affordable housing.
Exactly. I think that if you own an apartment, if you own a house, you got 3 bedrooms, and you want to rent one, well, you are still there, you know, and I don't have a problem with that, but I think it's being abused, and that's the problem. The same thing's happening with Uber, by the way, in terms of congestion. 100,000 more vehicles, for hire vehicles in the city, which is adding to the congestion. They should have capped it. I'm not anti-Uber, but you can't let these guys run amok, because now, you show the medallions are on.
Medallions have,
Guys, 5 suicides in the last
Yeah,
year
sad
and
to
a
hear
half or
that.
so. Yeah.
But that, you know, some people would say that industry, for the most part, was basically deading themselves, improper terminology, because they were refusing rides giving rides to minorities.
That's a good point.
And that's why there's nobody really jumping out saying we really feel bad for the medallion.
That's a good point. That was one of the problems. They did a couple of things which were not in their interest.
Right. Not picking up any outer boroughs and discriminating against minorities.
Exactly. That didn't help. But I think that I think they're changing now dramatically because they have to for business reasons. But I feel bad for these folks that have invested their entire life
lives,
savings.
yeah.
But the guys that made all the money in terms of medallions were these folks that owned 200 cabs, and they just leased them out. These guys were making millions of dollars, millions and millions. And they hurt themselves a little bit because when I was in the city council and the transportation committee, there weren't enough cabs to go around, and we wanted to expand the number of medallions, and they blocked it because they had such political clout. And it wasn't, your immigrant guy or gal that invested, their money, their life savings. It was these medallion owners who owned hundreds of these things, like the guy that De Blasio, that gave a lot of money to De Blasio, called the Taxi King. Remember?
Oh, yeah.
He's in trouble now. Actually, he's been indicted. But that guy owned like several hundred medallions. And what happened is, of course, they were worth about $1 million about 10 years ago. Now they're worth 150,000.
150.
So
they devalued.
It's incredible.
Just to spin back again with regards to the homeless thing, because again, we're looking at numbers with regards to what's happening with the mayor. There's close to 60,000 people homeless, and of that 20 some odd thousand are children that are in our shelters today. Clearly, he's failed on that front. With that, and I know the transition with regards to his commissioners and all of that stuff, and trying to determine who can do the job.
Right.
Which none of them basically. Now he touted a plan last September, and basically the plan says he's going to reduce population by 2,500 out of 60,000 over a 5-year period. Do you see that happening right now?
No, I do not see it happening. It's part of why this is happening, and you and I have had this discussion, is because there's a lack of affordable housing. I mean, the city owns 1,000 lots in this town. They should be building affordable housing, 100% affordable housing on those lots. But once again, his zoning plan is a giveaway to big real estate.
As noted by socialist Matthew Desmond, and I'll quote what he says, "We're in the middle of a housing crisis, and that means more and more people are giving more and more of their income to rent and utilities."
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I mean, if you're a young person in the city, it's
hard.
How do you afford it? I mean, some of the folks that are like my age, they're fortunate enough to live in rent-regulated housing, rent-stabilized housing, and they're active. They have a tenant association. They're fine, but young people are living 3-4 to an apartment now, and paying like $1,000 a piece to live in a cubbyhole. So we've got to do something about affordable housing, and there are things that we can do, and he's not doing it.
Now, you come from a very strong working class background.
Right.
Do you think people should have an opportunity and should be afforded an opportunity to own their own homes?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think the way I would frame it is, I would like to see people just spend a reasonable amount of money on housing. Like a third, like for example, at NYCHA, that make a third of their income goes towards rent. I mean, some people choose to rent for their entire lives, and they don't want the headache of a house. But bottom line is that we should make it as feasible as possible for people to get reasonable housing, whether it be rental or purchasing a house. In New York City now, my old neighborhood, Park Slope, where I grew up on Fifth Avenue, or my mother was a garment worker. We paid $40 a month in rent on railroad rooms, 4 rooms. You know, it was tight, but it was, you know, it was reasonable accommodation. She was a garment worker; she could afford the rent. Now you're talking about that same apartment going for like $5,000 a month. It's ridiculous. So, you know, we need to make housing more affordable, and we need that for the sake of the city as well.
Makes sense. We'll be right back with more from the Honorable Sal Albanese.
If it was legalized in Jersey and it was legal in Massachusetts and the federal government allowed it to go ahead, what would that do to New York, which is right in the middle?
Governor Cuomo diving into the debate. Should pot be legal in New York State? Good evening, everyone. The governor now calling for a closer look at how that move would impact the state. It comes less than 24 hours after his Republican rival Joe Giambra made his pro-pot pitch.
New York State is looking into the feasibility of legalizing recreational marijuana. That's what Governor Andrew Cuomo announced during his budget address Tuesday.
This is an important topic. It's a hotly debated topic, pardon the pun, and it'd be nice to have some facts in the middle of the debate.
While the money he's putting aside is specifically for fact-finding in New York, there are plenty of studies already done about Colorado and legal pot. The state legalized the sale of recreational marijuana in 2014. Our sister station in Denver covered the legalization extensively. The positives they've reported on include increased tax dollars, lower opioid-related deaths, and lower teen marijuana usage. Some negative reports include stores overselling to customers and a jump in arrests of people trying to transport marijuana out of state. Now, not everyone is on board with legalization in Western New York.
It's a money grab to me.
The director of Kids Escaping Drugs thinks legalization is a bad idea.
I can tell you that every kid on our campus has smoked marijuana, continues to smoke marijuana prior to coming here, and will identify that as one of the gateway drugs that led them on to whatever else they used.
Even with a report of lower teen usage of pot, Colorado still has one of the highest rates of teen marijuana usage in the country. This could be the first big step towards legal recreational marijuana in New York. And while opinions differ, Governor Cuomo hopes his study will provide more answers.
Blasio is pushing for New York City to become the first U.S. city to have safe injection sites for illegal drug users. Right now, there are no sites in the U.S. They would violate federal law by providing a place to use controlled substances. Now, the supervised injection sites have been successful in helping lower the number of overdoses in Canada and various European countries. There were more than 1,400 overdose deaths in New York City last year alone.
We're back with Sal Albanese talking about government and all the issues here in the city of New York and his campaign when he ran for mayor. And quite interesting and intriguing, a lot of things that we're hearing here. You know, you did hold the mayor to task. I mean, you didn't give him an opportunity to walk away from anything. You did give him some blows, and we needed you to do that. So I want to be very clear. So if your team is watching, the community wanted you to do that, taxpayers and voters. On this other issue that's going on in our city right now, I'm looking at the clips from, you know, what's been in the news. We're talking about heroin and the shoot-up sites that this mayor has proposed, yet against the backdrop of a nationwide opioid crisis.
Yeah.
The mayor recently announced a pilot program where he's setting up these shoot-up houses where addicts would be able to go and shoot up with no issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's very, very complicated, very difficult. The opioid problem is a crisis in America, and no one is immune from it. And I always consider, working in drug prevention for 5 years in junior high school, working with kids who are beginning to experiment with drugs. Drugs are always a symptom of a problem. I always consider it a health problem rather than a criminal justice problem. And I'm kind of puzzled about how these sites would work. I would say that according to the O'Neill, the police commissioner, who went to Canada, he said that they seem to be in Toronto. They seem to work in terms of getting people help, because when these addicts go into these facilities, there are people there who'll be in to work with them and try to wean them off drugs. So how to administer it and where to put it? I wouldn't put it in neighborhoods. I mean, maybe if you're going to implement these centers, I think they have to be in an industrial zone, right? You know, so that you wouldn't have the the serious neighborhood opposition to them, and there are too. I would say I would be willing to experiment and open one up to see how it works, to see if we can really help these folks.
I mean, like really, because what happens if somebody dies? Is the city liable?
Oh, yeah.
Or taxpayers going to have to foot another bill for lawsuits or whatever the case may be?
Well, the city, yeah, if the city's running it, they are liable. I mean, one of the reasons why I think they're trying to promote these sites is because if these folks they're going to inject anyway, right? So they're using dirty needles. They're overdosing as a result of not knowing how to do this. I mean, it's hard to envision that you're actually helping people inject the drug. You know, but if you look at it from a pragmatic perspective, it does make some sense. But I would be careful about where I put it, and I would also be. I would also use it as a pilot program to see how it works.
So, I mean, so at what point does the host assume responsibility? I mean, Sal, you come to my house for a party, I serve you drinks, you get drunk, and God forbid you go get in a car accident and die.
You're going to get sued.
Am I right?
Yeah.
So is that not the same thing with regards to somebody going to a house that the city of New York is endorsing to say this is a place you can come and be safe, not knowing if they're using, like you said, a dirty needle, not knowing if they got bad drugs?
They would get a clean needle. I mean, that's
so we assume.
Yeah. That's I mean, listen, anytime the city's involved in anything, there's always a liability issue. You're absolutely right. And you're right. There probably would be lawsuits as a result of it. It's a very complicated problem. There are no simple solutions. My view is that we got to focus heavily on education. You know, get kids involved in positive activities. You know, try to deal with some of the. I mean, there are some great facilities around the city that are doing good work, like in Sunset Park, the Center for Family Life, where I used to refer kids who came from really tough backgrounds and then begin to work with the families, and try to. I mean, it's all about self-esteem, right? If you've got, as a kid, if you've got good self-esteem, and you're positive, you're not going to turn to drugs. And drugs are unfortunately readily available, and they're an escape mechanism for a lot of people. And it's a complicated problem we're not going to be able to resolve with a magic wand. You try to do as least harm as possible. That's why I think the marijuana. I support legalization of marijuana because I think kids.
Why so?
Well, because. And by the way, I never smoked pot. I don't think it's good for you. I don't think I'm a square, but I've never smoked marijuana.
I hate the smell of this stuff, but I'm just
well,
curious to know.
because it's widely available. Kids are being arrested on a regular basis. Mostly kids.
Well, weren't they saying that they're supposed to be the mayor, quote unquote, is instructing the police commissioner and the NYPD to minimize those
Well,
those
right.
arrests?
We'll see if that happens. I mean, we'll see if that happens. Bottom line is that 14 states have now legalized recreational marijuana, and they're using, you know, it's brought in a lot of revenue for those states, and they target it to other things that are beneficial, and I'd rather have the police focus on serious crimes. I mean, I still don't want people smoking pot on the street.
Wouldn't it still be?
No.
Does it still create an opportunity for the black market to sell marijuana still?
No. That wipes it out. Pretty much wipes it out, which is another good thing. You know, and also it would ensure that the marijuana that's being produced would be of a quality that doesn't kill people.
Which is not the K2 situation we're dealing with.
Exactly,
right now.
the synthetic marijuana. So, you know, I wish nobody took drugs. Bottom line is, but you know, since the beginning of time, people have been getting high on their socks. I mean, just people. There's a large percentage of the population that, you know, for a lot of reasons, get high. They use alcohol. I mean, alcohol abuse, I mean, is a disaster. I mean, people who drink and it causes havoc. But, you know, it's legal. It's legal, and you can control it. Very tough issue. All those issues are tough there. And, of course, politicians will use them as hot button issues. You know? And instead of trying to solve the problem, they're gonna divide, you know, and they're gonna bring up things that are, you know, it's not gonna be discussed in a. Let me put it to you this way: in a open and objective way. It's going to be politicized. And when you politicize something, then, the merits, as you know, go astray.
Let me ask this question. So we're, moving on to this. The governor's race.
Yeah.
You have a horse in that race?
Not
How do you
really.
how you see it panning out right now?
I think Cuomo is going to get reelected. I think Nixon, it doesn't really resonate with people. I mean, I like some of the things she's saying. I'm not a big fan of.
She likes marijuana. I mean, she
Well,
likes.
yeah. So Cuomo's going to like it too. Not they're all. By the way, I was for legalization in 2013. Oh, De Blasio said no. Now, of course, he's going to be for legalization. Cuomo's going to be for legalization.
So here's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
2021. What are you doing?
As
you
I said,
mayor again, or
no,
anything else that
I
you'd be
never
interested
rule
in?
anything. I never rule anything out, but I don't think I'm going to run again because I just can't raise the money unless we change the system, totally overhaul
to
it.
that system that you talked about.
Yeah,
Yes.
I realize that no matter how good you are, I mean, you have great ideas. You can have a lot of grassroots support. It's hard to overcome the money. The money is, and they'll tell you. Anybody who go, speak to, you've been in the arena.
I've been around and seen it.
It's
It's
all
crazy.
about the money, and it's terrible because when you get there under those circumstances, you become like Bill De Blasio. Pay to play. I mean, that's
Wow,
really,
and that's what you
that's
don't
what it's
want.
all about. I told people many times, I don't want the job under those circumstances.
Sal, thank you so
Hey.
much, man. Your conventional wisdom is awesome,
Thank
man.
you. Great
Appreciate
talking
you.
to
Hope
you.
to have you back real soon.
Absolutely.
Sal Albanese, and we'll be right back with my rant after this. So there you have it. A story of an Italian immigrant who came to America during a time when you didn't have to have a lot of money to get into politics. The average New Yorker, if you saw something wrong, could get into the political game and make a change themselves without being compromised or being bought outright. But not today, because we have someone in office right now who clearly doesn't serve the best interest of the average New Yorker. Someone who clearly doesn't see anything wrong with doing favors for people who contribute to his campaign. Someone who clearly broke the intent and spirit of the law, whatever that means. But I guess enough of you said it. It didn't matter anyway because he won. Now the rest of us, including you, are suffering for it. Everywhere you go, everywhere you look is a city building that's been sold and turned into a high-rise because this mayor has put a big for sale sign up on their city under the pretense of affordable housing. So what's the lesson? Like Sal Albanese, you see something wrong, get into the political game and make a change for yourself. Make a change for all of us. Because if we've learned anything from the last two mayors, two men who were clearly not from New York City, is that they've certainly not done right by the rest of us. But let's be honest, they aren't the problem. We are.